Buying a new home can be incredibly exciting, but it can also be quite stressful if you're not fully prepared for some of the financial challenges that can come up besides just the regular purchase price of the house. We personally learned a lot from buying our first home back in 2018, and as we have sold that and prepared to purchase our second home, we learned a lot and have made some changes. And so there are 4 bank accounts that we're using to help ourselves prepare so we are ready for anything and can spend a lot less on interest and pay off our house much faster. So if that sounds good to you, stick around. When we're talking about these bank accounts, we have several different savings accounts, each named what I'll describe in the video, and they also are all in a high yield savings account so that they are getting more interest. If you just keep money in regular bank accounts, you're missing out on so much interest that builds up over time, and that is essentially free money for your funds sitting there. And especially in our case where we had a 1-year window from when we sold our condo and while we're waiting for our house to be built, when we're in an apartment for a year, those extra funds from the sale of our condo are very important to grow interest and actually have already gained over $3,000 of interest just in the last 5 months. So it's very important to make sure your money is working for you. Every dollar counts. The very first and most important of the accounts is for your down payment. Now, with the down payment, I think that's kind of the extent that a lot of people think of. So this is definitely the most obvious category, but it is important to be prepared for that. And I do highly recommend that you try to wait to make sure you've got the full 20%. I know you technically don't have to have a full 20% down in order to purchase a property, but if you don't make that 20%, there are extra fees you'll be hit with every single month for private mortgage insurance or PMI. I think if you're looking at that situation, it might be best to put off purchasing a home or to lower your housing budget. It's so easy for housing budgets to creep up, especially when you see different things that really excite you or make you feel like this is a property you have to go for. But I think for many people who are looking to purchase a home, that added stress and added cost may not be worth making the jump. So I think being very patient in your home search, if you're not able to meet the down payment you want, is critical. And I know in our case, we might have taken it to, the opposite end. We actually saved 50% down before we bought our condo. Now, we did choose a condo as it was a more affordable investment for us. It was only $161,000 when we bought it back in 2018. We rented apartments in lower cost areas for 4.5 years prior, so doing that enabled us to save more. And as we prepare to move this summer into a home that's much more expensive, we have 30% down that we'll be able to contribute. Having the higher down payment is very nice because ultimately then you owe less. So you're going to have smaller mortgage payments. You may even be able to get a better rate. Of course, though, if you can't afford putting more into the house and you're putting everything in, that's not a good idea either. It's all about a balance, but we have found that to be very beneficial to make sure that we are not jumping in over our heads and doing something too risky if we weren't going to be able to afford, the standard 20% down payment. But you can't just stop there. Unfortunately, problems happen. And when we had first moved into our condo that seemed really good, we actually had about $8,000 to $10,000 of expenses, either because things went wrong, we replaced things, and we also did want to make some cosmetic changes, such as painting everything and changing out some flooring, because there was some not so great carpet in the space. I hadn't actually saved separate funds for those, and so that was definitely a little bit more intensive to shoulder that first year. And I know that unexpected stuff can show up a lot of the time, especially in older homes. All this to say, a furniture and repair fund is a must. And I would ahead of time plan out what kind of pieces of furniture you'll need, what sorts of home repair or renovation projects are essential or required, and also having just a little extra there that's set aside for the unfortunate situations that may come up after you move, whatever the case is. And of course, how do you decide how much you have in this fund? I think it will depend upon a few different factors, and I think a lot of it's kind of on a continuum as you think about the price of the home compared to the price of whatever upgrades would be needed. Certain homes may be more updated, but those will come with a higher price tag. So you have to decide, is that price tag worth it? And having some numbers prepared ahead of time for the other stuff that is more controllable, like furniture preparations or a set amount of money for unexpected repairs, it might be a little easier for you to make those decisions. For our home, as we're preparing, we have calculated that we want $14,000 set aside for new furniture purchases and just to have as a backup for any additional things we have to do. Because our home is new construction, we're not as worried about needing to make a bunch of repairs, but I am sure different things will come up and certain upgrades will be made as time goes on. And so having funds set aside for that is really a great way to reduce stress and know that you're covered no matter what happens. In conjunction with what I've just talked about, an emergency fund is very important, not just for buying a home, but at any stage in life. However, what's not a good strategy is to drain your emergency fund or just continue to pull from that fund for house-related items. And that's why I think the furniture and repair fund as a separate account is crucial. And of course, we don't want to drain your emergency fund to fund your down payment either. And so with an emergency fund, of course, whatever you're able to do is good. I know common recommendations are between 3 and 6 months of necessary expenses. And that's important to also think about with your new mortgage payment from, whatever type of home you're looking at, to make sure that you've got enough funds to cover yourself if an unfortunate situation happens, such as losing a job or dealing with medical challenges. And so for our case, we actually had a $10,000 emergency fund that was just kind of, left alone for several years, I guess since 2018 or so. But at this point, since our expenses are going to be going up with the new home and our mortgage will be going up a couple $1,000s more than what it was in the past, we are actually now bumping our emergency fund up to a total of $25,000. So adding $15,000 to it. And we're in the midst of adding that right now this year as we continue to build up these accounts. So that's just a way that we're able to prepare for ourselves for any emergencies that could happen and make sure that by the time we move into this home, we are ready and set and covered for 6 months of living expenses should anything unfortunate happen. And of course, others will tell you to have higher than 6 months. I think a year is a great option too. I know for our sakes, though, we are prioritizing this fourth account that I'll tell you about instead of bumping up the emergency fund to 12 months at this time. Finally, that brings us to our fourth account, and that is the one that I didn't necessarily know about or realize was important when we were first buying a home back in 2018. And that is what I am calling the loan bonus account. Very boring title, but with an amazing purpose. When my husband and I first moved into our condo back in 2018, I knew the down payment was important because I wanted to knock that out right away. But what I didn't realize was how amortization calculators worked. Essentially, the very first payment you have is going to be so heavy interest, but then the very last payment you make will be mostly principal on the property. To use specific numbers from our first home, our monthly payment for just principal and interest was about $1,000 a month, technically $1,012. And with this, the very first payment was $367 going to interest. So 1/3 approximately, a little more than that, from the start was just going to interest. We were losing that money. However, the very last payment, only about $10 was going to interest, and the rest of that was all going to principal. Now that's for a much smaller property. It gets way worse if you've got more expensive properties. And I'm not going to lie, the numbers I've seen for our upcoming property are pretty insane, and so much is going to interest right away. Now, that can be frustrating because you are making these payments for your new property and you're not seeing the results on your principal, the amount that you own, of the property for a long time. However, that's where loan bonus comes in. The loan bonus account is an incredible opportunity to throw in an additional large chunk of change on the property. You'll decide what makes sense for you and your situation, but putting that extra money in right at the beginning is a way to bypass a lot of that interest. Get it out of the way and not have to ever pay it again. I know it was so fun to see after I put in extra money and extra payments, you have now saved, X number of dollars of interest. And on our condo, we did end up paying it off in 3 years, which was great. And we saved $17,000 of interest, which was huge. And for much longer mortgages that are much higher amounts, you might be paying the whole cost of the home in interest if you're not careful and not able to make extra payments as you can. So for us, having that loan bonus amount, that extra amount of money to throw in after our down payment, has cleared and we are now closed on the property and it's ours, is going to make a world of difference. And I didn't know that before going into it. The good news too is the loan bonus idea can still be incredibly helpful at any point in the mortgage. Whenever you've got extra funds, throw it into the mortgage. I know sometimes people think, well, keep that mortgage, focus your money in other ways. And well, I think that's important. We still contribute to our retirement funds during this process. We still contribute to our investments. We also value rapid house payoff because when you are at the start of that mortgage, that's when the interest feels a lot more intense and more interest is owed at the start. Later on, it's easier to coast a bit because you're not losing as much to interest. So that's for us kind of the mindset of these different accounts. And so for loan bonus, we don't have an exact target like the other accounts I talked about, but really anything extra that we have is going in there. And we're kind of dividing up the funds each month accordingly. So that is something I would encourage you to give a try to as well as you think about your future home buying experience. If you're interested in more financial or home related content, I'll link some videos here that you can check out, and feel free to subscribe to the channel if you're new. I'll see you next time. Bye.